It was an ordinary night when the Sentinel claimed its 17th victim. The difference was that Clarissa didn't know the other victims. Not really. Nothing beyond seeing their faces splashed on news headlines for a few days. The type of story that made you go, "Wow, how tragic," as you sipped your morning coffee, then went about your day, otherwise wholly unaffected. But not this time. Because unlike the other nameless deceased, the 17th victim was one Clarissa knew very well. It had been a cool, crisp day in Brunswick. The sky was clear. The leaves had just begun to fall to the ground, littering the sidewalk like an assortment of crunchy confetti. There had been nothing particularly distinguishing about that day. No reason to believe that things would take a tragic turn after sundown. Aside from Clarissa's own instinct that told her something was very wrong, a little nagging voice that told her Kyle hadn't gone to work early that day to earn overtime, that he wasn't answering his phone because he was in trouble, not busy, that she should ditch her shift and go check on him instead. But her boss wouldn't be happy about that, and they were behind on rent. "He's fine. I'm sure he's fine. It's Kyle. He's always fine." Yet as soon as the doorbell rang that evening, Clarissa Jenkins felt it in her bones, and her thoughts grew frantic. Something is very, very wrong. When she yanked open the door to her tiny 2-bedroom apartment, her knees began to tremble, her thoughts turning to guilt and shame, begging for absolution that would never come. "You failed your own brother and you know it. You killed Kyle. You killed him. You killed him, you goddamn killer." Sheriff Martson's grave face confirmed her fears. She didn't even have to hear the words, "It's your brother." She already knew in her very core, and she nearly collapsed on the spot, knees threatening to buckle. Her older brother, Kyle, was gone. He'd been her roommate, her confidant, her best friend, the only family she had left after the loss of their mother 4 years prior. Kyle had forgone finishing college in favor of a crappy telemarketing job so that he could support Clarissa, who at 17 was still a minor at the time. Now she was 21, and doing her best, she had a job working at the local pet supermarket. While she loved being around animals, the pay was awful. Kyle was still the breadwinner by a long shot. He was also the one who fixed their shared laptop when it got a virus, who had more patience with her than anyone else in the world, who always seemed to know the right words to say when Clarissa was too broken to even form a sentence. This person, dead, killed himself at the hanging tree. The cursed tree stood in the center of the forest that skirted town, rising above the other trees like some hellish monolith, with gnarled branches that resembled knobby fingers and dark, craggy bark that could have passed for dried-up magma. The tree became a beacon for the suicidal, almost like that movie about the witch who beckoned kids deeper into the woods until it was too late to turn back. It's as though the tree snared you with its cracked limbs, held you against its rough bark, and refused to let go no matter how many times you cried uncle. Clarissa wished the thing had been burned to the ground a long time ago. But being the oldest and tallest tree of its kind in the country, it was historically protected by some antiquated preservation law. Kyle had slipped a noose around his neck and strung himself from that tree, just like the 16 people before him, just like more would undoubtedly do in the future. Clarissa's mind flooded with a sudden, unwelcome image of Kyle's face purple, his tongue swollen, his feet dangling under him, swaying in the breeze. Did his neck break on impact, or did he struggle for his last breath? Clarissa didn't want to think about it, yet it was suddenly all she could think about. When you tell someone not to look at the bloody train wreck, isn't their first instinct to turn their head despite the warning? Clarissa knew there was one big problem with this whole scenario, though. Their lives had never been a cakewalk, but Kyle had never been suicidal. She was sure of it. Sheriff's gruff voice pulled Clarissa from her thoughts. "I'm so sorry, honey." "Yeah, well, screw you, Sheriff." That's what she wanted to say, because what good does sorry do, anyway? It's a reflex, what people spew when they don't know what else to say, as sincere as a knee jerking when it got hit by the doctor's little hammer, an empty phrase that wouldn't bring her brother back, or her mother, or fix her seriously fucked up life. Instead of saying any of this, Clarissa nodded and thanked him. After all, she had no right to be angry with him. The blame rested purely on her own shoulders. Sheriff's bushy salt and pepper brows crept closer together around the deep crease in his forehead. His bald head gleamed in the dim lighting of Clarissa's apartment hallway as he clamped a hand on her shoulder. It was meant as a reassuring gesture, she was sure, yet she had to resist the strong urge to pry his beefy fingers off of her. By the time Sheriff left, Clarissa felt nothing but emptiness. Like someone had taken a vacuum and sucked her insides out along with anything that was capable of feeling pain. She closed the door and pressed her back to it, slid to the floor with her knees curled to her chest, put her head in her hands. But the tears never came. Her mind became one-tracked as though the news of her brother's death had stripped her brain of the ability to think of anything other than one repeated, resounding mantra. My fault. This is all my fault. The tree, of course, was infamous around town. It was Brunswick's one claim to fame, what put it on the map. The oldest, tallest elm tree in the United States, with its spooky, gruesome past to boot, a magnet for the history and macabre enthusiast alike. From 1956 onward, 16 people had hung themselves from that tree. All younger adults, in the prime of their lives, too. Now make that 17. The first in 5 years. For all Clarissa knew, the tree could have claimed many more before that, ones that simply weren't recorded. Maybe no one kept track before 1956. Maybe others were loners with no one to claim their bodies, so they were cut down and forgotten, left to feed the earth as worm food. Perhaps only the tree itself knew its real body count. As the tree was legend around Brunswick, of course, it was subject to the occasional dare, and Clarissa had fallen for one like the colossal dumbass she apparently was. Spend one whole night sleeping in the woods next to the hanging tree, and you come out different, said the local legend. 2 weeks ago, when one of her coworkers had offered to pay her $200 if she'd do it, Clarissa hadn't turned it down. She didn't believe in the legend at the time. Suicidal people sought the tree, not the other way around. People went there when they hit rock bottom and saw no other way out. The tree didn't make them that way. No. She didn't believe the hype of the legend, so she was unafraid, and she and Kyle could use the money. What she hadn't bargained for was Kyle following her there. She'd just reached the clearing in front of the tree and its accompanying placard when she heard a noise. Clary, come home. She spun around at the sudden intrusion, eyes wide, but breathed a sigh of relief when she saw her brother. I found your note, he clarified, referring to the one she'd left on the kitchen counter, so he wouldn't worry about why she wasn't home. In retrospect, it probably made him worry more. She bent to place her sleeping bag and backpack on the ground as he moved closer. You can try to talk me out of this all you want, but I'm not losing this dare. They offered me $200, Kyle. We need it, and you know that. Dusk was already beginning to bathe the world in a golden glow, the sun hanging lower in the sky and backlighting the many leaves of the hanging tree in such a way that they almost looked ablaze. Clarissa shivered against a sudden chill in the evening air. Fine, you can stay, but I'm not letting you do this alone. So if I can't talk you out of it, then I'm staying right here too. You're my little sister, Clary, and I'm here to protect you, Kyle said. It was then that she realized he was also clutching a sleeping bag, their mother's old camping gear. "Protection from what? It's just a stupid tree. This'll be easy money." But Kyle didn't look so sure. He was always the more superstitious of the two of them, after all. He cleared his throat, ran a hand through his dark blonde hair, and changed the subject. "So how do we prove we were here all night?" Clarissa showed him the old camcorder. It, too, had belonged to their mother. It had a timestamp which should provide sufficient proof. Clarissa set it up on its tripod, adjusting the sights until it was centered on the tree that Kyle was currently examining. "Hey, come here and look at this. I never noticed this before." Kyle motioned her over with a quick wave of his hand, and she stepped from behind the tripod, passing the wooden placard along the way that proudly declared the tree the oldest and tallest in the United States. "Also the most prone to dead people hanging from its branches," she added silently. She brushed past the sign and leaned close as her brother gestured toward the tree trunk. Clarissa had to squint for a moment before realizing what she was looking at. There were tiny carvings all over the tree. Carvings of faces, etched right into the bark. Dozens of them. What's more, all the faces appeared to be moaning, and Clarissa couldn't quite tell whether they were moans of agony or ecstasy. Either way, the sight was unsettling, and Clarissa felt the cold fingers of fear raking down her spine, eliciting goosebumps all over her body. She pulled her jacket tighter around her middle. "Do any of these faces look familiar to you?" she asked, examining a couple of the etchings closer, despite the alarm bells going off in her head. Kyle nodded. "Uh-huh. That's Marty Wakefield, right? And that's Lisa Owens. Two people who—" He trailed off and gulped before continuing. "Who committed suicide here." "That's wild. Who would carve their faces like that? Is it some kind of sick prank?" "I really don't know. Maybe they did it themselves." "But why?" "It's like they were saying I was here. A final statement." Kyle said the words almost wistfully, touching the bark with his fingers. "Maybe they were just making their last mark on the earth before returning to it." "Dust to dust," she whispered. "Something like that." More goosebumps rose on her skin at the notion. But no, screw this. She was not letting the legend of the tree get inside her head and ruin her chance at easy money. Sure, this is creepy, but it wasn't indicative of anything supernatural. They were just super macabre carvings, probably made by some tourist who was creepily obsessed over the town's unique history. Those types passed through here on occasion, posing with the tree for their death blogs, attempting seances atop its many roots that poked up through the damp earth. The siblings set up their sleeping bags a few feet from the tree and took turns telling stories for the next hour or two to pass the time, long after the sun had dipped below the horizon and the moon took its place high in the sky. Kyle was a great storyteller, much better than her. He told the one about the murderer with the hook hands, complete with sound effects and the flashlight Clarissa had brought pointed upward under his chin, lighting up his nostrils and eyebrows, and she couldn't help but laugh. She was too on edge for sleep, and she appreciated his company even more. But at some point, around midnight, the mood shifted, and Kyle grew quiet. She assumed he was just tired. She was too, after all. So there they sat, huddled together atop their sleeping bags under the foreboding moonlit-backed shadow of the tree, the air growing thick and heavy with apprehension around them. Clarissa started to realize this place was, in fact, creepy as shit. Regardless of whether she believed the tree had some paranormal mind control power, 16 people had lost their lives in this spot, and suddenly Clarissa felt like she could hear their final strangled breaths all at once. And sitting there in the midnight darkness, in the middle of a forest, with no sound other than overexcited crickets and her own pulse thrumming wildly in her ears, she understood why people so readily bought into the legend of the tree. Just then a twig snapped nearby, and Clarissa's body tensed, her mind instantly going to 100 dark places at once. What if it was a pack of hungry coyotes ready to tear them apart? Or a serial killer with hooks for hands and a disembowelment fetish? she whispered. But when she looked to her brother, he was curled up in his sleeping bag and snoring softly. Thankfully, the noise didn't return. Either it was some animal that wandered back where it came from, or it was her imagination. "Keep it together, Clarissa," she told herself. Despite fighting a battle with her own heavy eyelids, at some point she must have dozed off. Sometime later, she woke up to the sound of shuffling. She rubbed her eyes in confusion before remembering where she was and why, and then took a brief second to try to figure out what time it was. She peeked at her phone. 3 a.m. Her eyes widened as they adjusted to the dark and focused on the source of the shuffling noise. Kyle stood facing the tree in the dark, running his hands over the bark like someone touching their lover. His hands explored, caressed, and Clarissa had this weird feeling of intruding on a private moment. "Kyle?" she croaked from her sleeping bag. "What are you doing?" But it seemed as though he was under some deep trance. Hands still on the tree trunk, he leaned closer to the bark and sniffed, like a bloodhound searching for a scent. It could have been a trick of the shadows, but she could have sworn she saw Kyle's tongue dart out to lick the tree, tasting it, running it up and down the black bark in long, smooth strokes as though savoring a rare delicacy. "What the hell?" "Kyle!" she hissed again, louder this time. He didn't answer in words, but in laughter. A low, bone-chilling chuckle floated to her on the night's breeze, growing in intensity. Only it wasn't her brother's laugh. It sounded more like a hyena on steroids. Kyle still faced the tree, his head leaning against it. What's more, he held something in his hand. His fingers made spastic motions, and it took Clarissa a moment to realize what he was doing. He was carving something into the tree, carving like a madman. On shaking legs, Clarissa stood. She closed the short gap between her and Kyle, reached out to put a trembling hand on his shoulder. He spun suddenly. There was a vacant look in his eyes, pupils fully dilated, and he hissed at her just like a snake. She gasped and jumped back. He took a menacing step toward her, tongue darting in and out as though tasting the air, expression wild. He dragged out his S's as he spoke. "Yggdrasil requires sacrifice. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Some must return to the earth to fuel the earth's appetite. Yggdrasil requires sacrifice." He hissed in a wispy, dry voice that was his and yet not his at all. "Kyle, stop! You're scaring me!" she cried, unable to hide the despair in her tone. What was happening? But then something changed and her brother snapped from his trance just like that. Had this been some kind of a weird sleepwalk, and he was only just now waking up? Kyle blinked a couple times in confusion. Once he realized what had happened, his mouth fell open, snapped shut. Then he shook his head and said, "We need to leave now, Clary. Fuck the money." After what Clarissa had just seen, she wasn't about to argue. She grabbed the camera, shut it off, quickly packed her things, and followed her brother at a brisk pace out of the woods. Over the course of the next couple weeks, Kyle had grown vacant. He barely spoke to her, and when she asked him what was wrong, how she could help, he snapped and called her a pest and a leech, something he never did, something he never even thought, she was sure of it. Though maybe deep down he did resent her for having to step up and take care of her for so long. Maybe he had a right to resent her, too. Maybe she'd always taken him for granted. Regardless, Kyle had never treated her so poorly, and when she brought up the prospect of therapy, he laughed in her face. "You think I have money lying around for therapy, Clary? I can barely afford to take care of you." She hadn't brought up the subject again. and she could only watch with bated breath as her brother slowly became a husk of the person he once was. He sported dark purple circles under his eyes like he hadn't been sleeping, his cheeks growing gaunt as though food didn't interest him either. She tried to keep an eye on him, worried about the trance he'd been in the night at the tree, about the changes she'd seen in him since then. But eventually she couldn't fight sleep anymore. He snuck out in the middle of the night when she was unconscious. When she woke up, he was gone, though that wasn't uncommon as he often worked longer hours than her. Not this time, though. He never went to the office that day, and she never saw her brother alive again. The next time she saw him, it was to formally identify his cold and lifeless corpse on a steel slab in the coroner's office. At least his body seemed at peace, his features relaxed, pale eyes closed. No more carrying the weight of the world like a permanent yoke. "I love you," Clarissa had said, touching his blonde head. Had she said those words enough when he was alive? By some miracle, she'd made it back home from the grisly task, wondering how the hell she was going to come up with money for a funeral. Now, in the wake of the savage tornado that had just torn the only good things in her life to pieces, Clarissa was determined to find out all she could. The circumstances surrounding Kyle's death were too strange, too coincidental. Breathing deeply, she slid into the kitchen chair with a laptop she'd shared with her brother, the one he'd fixed so recently. She opened a browser window to research Yggdrasil, the name her brother had said in the woods. It took her a while to figure out the correct spelling, and then there it was, splashed across Google. Dozens of entries. In Norse cosmology, Yggdrasil is a massive sacred tree. It was thought that the god Odin sacrificed himself to the tree, Clarissa read out loud. She thought of her brother's hissed words that night. Yggdrasil requires sacrifice. Something else dawned on Clarissa then, and she raced to find the camera that had been recording all night. Fingers trembling, she hit the rewind button, then pressed play. For a long time, Clarissa watched herself talking to her brother, wishing he were alive next to her right then, watching as he told his stories with gusto as the two of them fell asleep, and a curious owl flew by the camera. For a while, nothing happened. But then Clarissa saw something that made the fine hairs in the back of her neck stand up. At precisely 3 a.m., she saw a lens flare on the camera. No, more like an orb. It flew out of the tree trunk and flew straight to Kyle, absorbing into his body. Once that happened, his body twitched and his eyes flew open. He stood and gave the most chilling, twisted grin she'd ever seen, staring right into the camera. Then he turned to face the tree, marching over to it mindlessly, sniffing it, licking it, carving it. That was when Clarissa had woken up too. Goosebumps erupted all over her body as Clarissa rewound the tape and played it back over and over, watching the orb jump to her sleeping brother. And just like that, she knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that the tree had done something to her brother. Something beyond comprehension. It didn't make sense, but that tree was conscious. It was evil. And it had killed her brother. Now, she was dead set on burning the fucking thing to the ground until it was nothing more than a pile of ashes. Big Tree, the Sentinel. Tallest elm in USA, approximately 112 feet. Oldest elm in USA, estimated 284 years. The empty gas can shook in Clarissa's hands as she read the tree's placard by flashlight. Somehow, Clarissa knew that the tree was far older than the placard let on. Suddenly, she saw the tree as a living, breathing entity, a sentinel watching the forest. Its trunk a body, its bark skin, its branches limbs, its leaves hair, its eyes everywhere. She pictured her brother hanging from the longest branch overhead, his sneakers scraping her forehead. She shuddered at the thought, forcing the horrible imagery from her mind. Carefully, she set the gas can on the ground next to the sign's wooden post. She pulled the drawstrings of her black hoodie tighter around her face. The smell of gasoline stung her nostrils, wafting from the base of the tree. Reaching into her pocket, her hand emerged with a pack of matches, but then she paused. She leaned close, gasping as her flashlight illuminated a particular etching in the bark. This one was new. Her brother's face, mouth opened in an O of ecstasy or agony. She still couldn't tell which. So this is what he had carved into the tree that night. His own face. The hanging tree loomed over her like some hulking mugger threatening to shank her in a dark alley. It was a foreboding monster at night, with its shadowed branches seeming like hundreds of arms reaching for her throat. She hated being here at night, but the forest paths around it were frequented by tourists and hikers during the day, and she was fairly sure someone would try to stop her from doing what she came here to do. She couldn't risk that. This is it, she thought as her thumb stroked the pack of matches in her pocket. This is where Kyle took his life. Her brother had not been suicidal. No way. The tree had done this to him, and if it was up to her, it would never get a chance to harm anyone again. Kyle was the outgoing one, the optimist, the one who always had a smile on his face, whose laugh was infectious, who could make friends with an ease that baffled Clarissa. Hell, even their landlord loved him, and their landlord hated everyone, including her. Clarissa was the one with the permanent scowl, who kept to herself and had exactly 0 friends outside of her brother. She was the one who couldn't cope after they lost their mother, who dreamed of dragging razor blades over her wrists more than once. But not Kyle. Never Kyle. At least, not until 2 weeks ago. Not until the night at the tree. With her jaw clenched tightly, holding her breath, Clarissa unearthed the pack of matches from her pocket and lit one, but a sudden breeze blew it out before she could drop it in the gas puddle. Shit, she muttered, reaching for another one. She struck it, and the flame flared and burned her finger, causing her to yelp and drop it. The flame extinguished before it hit the ground, and now Clarissa was pissed. You're going to burn, you son of a bitch, she hissed at the tree. This time she doused the trunk with more gas and lit the match directly next to the tree, sure the bark would catch immediately considering all the accelerant fumes that burned her nose. But the tree refused to catch, the flame fanning out toward her fingers as though the bark were not only fire retardant but generating its own wind. She tried match after match until the whole pack was gone. The tree was officially fireproof. Clarissa froze then, sure she had heard something. Frowning, she leaned closer to the tree. Another muffled noise. Scared yet curious, like a dumb moth drawn toward a bug zapper, she pressed her ear against the tree. She jumped when she heard a thumping noise, followed by a voice she thought she'd never hear again. Run, Clarissa. Run now. Kyle? But it was too late. Just as she took her first step back, a bright, glowing orb exited the tree, darting out like a hornet looking for an easy target to sting. It shot straight into Clarissa's chest, and she was thrown off her feet, feeling hot and cold all at once. An ancient, earthy smell filled her nostrils, flooded her senses, replacing the gasoline odor. At once, she heard a voice in her head. It was everywhere inside her body, around her, flooding her every thought. The earth requires sacrifice to thrive. Odin himself sacrificed his own body to me. I serve as a bridge between the mortal world and Niflheim, the underworld. If I were to falter, the two worlds would collide. I must be fed life to live. My sisters feed with me all across the globe. Clarissa's brows rose. So there were more of these trees spread across the world like some ravenous soul-eating network? Give yourself to me. Strangely, Clarissa's fears were somehow extinguished, like they too had been nothing more than a match flame. She responded in turn, standing up and walking back over to the tree. Yes, I will give myself to you, she whispered. Somewhere in the back of her mind, her subconscious screamed out a warning that she was under some sort of spell, that she was being tricked, but her limbs refused to listen to her brain. Leaning forward, she sniffed the tree, smelling its ancient, earthy power. She was hardly aware of the fact that somewhere along the line she'd picked up a sharp rock and used it to carve something into the bark of the tree. She didn't need to look at it to know she'd just carved her own face scrunched up in an expression of bliss or agony. Soon, hundreds of other voices danced inside her head, and Clarissa felt the spirits of the tree and the forest, animal and human alike, and laughter burst from her chest uncontrollably. Laughter that wasn't her own, but the voice of the forest itself bubbling right out of her. Give yourself to me now, Yggdrasil commanded into her mind. Yes, Clarissa said, hardly recognizing her own voice. At once a thick vine lowered from the tree right in front of her, a perfect noose. Clarissa knew what she had to do. She slipped the noose over her head and stood limp, her hands relaxed at her sides as she accepted her fate. Do not fear, child. The noose tightened and pulled then, lifting Clarissa clear off her feet. At once she was released from the trance just long enough to realize with horror what she had just done. To realize that she was now dying. That these were her last moments of conscious living. Her feet kicked, and she wheezed through her crushed windpipe. I'm sorry, Kyle, she thought as the world faded through her mortal eyes, as her spirit lifted from her body and watched her lifeless corpse dangle in the autumn breeze. But her spirit couldn't flee, couldn't exit the forest. She'd barely even had time to register the fact that she was now dead. Her hands were translucent in front of her face. No sooner had she realized that fact than the tree began to suck her in like a vacuum sucking up a dust bunny. She fought, she screamed, she cried, lashing out with her limbs. But she was dead now, her body non-corporeal, and no one was coming to help her. And just like that, she was suspended in a hollow, damp place, her arms stuck at her sides, her legs immobile as though she were standing in a coffin of wet sand that had buried her up to her neck. She could sense her brother nearby, but she couldn't find him. She could only look out through the trunk of the tree, observing the forest outside. The tree wrapped her up like a cocoon, beat around her like a heart thudding in her ears, overwhelming her senses. Clarissa shouted and struggled to try to free herself, but whatever force held her in place squeezed harder. The sooner you accept your fate, the better, or you will be struggling for eternity. You are immortal inside of me. You are the watchful eyes of the forest. You are the earth now. At Yggdrasil's words, Clarissa stopped struggling, watching out into the darkness of the woods. A couple of deer trotted by, sniffing the roots they carefully navigated around. An owl hooted in the distance. A coyote howled at the moon, searching for its pack. The legs of her own dead body dangled just overhead, barely within her limited window of vision. For some strange reason, all Clarissa could think about was the fact that her shoelace was untied. That she'd be found that way. A hot mess with a purple face and untied shoes. Though, what did it matter? She had no friends. Her entire family was dead. and they'd replace her at the pet supermarket within a week. Clarissa's footprint upon the earth had been light, and soon she'd be nothing more than dust in the wind. Dust to dust. She attempted to draw a soothing breath, but she no longer possessed lungs to fill. Panic filled her instead, and Yggdrasil could sense her unease. Fear not, for you are now one with me, Yggdrasil. Forever. Is this not better? And somehow, Clarissa accepted what had come to pass. Here, with her brother cocooned nearby, so close yet permanently out of reach, at least there was no pain, no debts, no ugly living. Here it just was. Forever. Clarissa thought, staring out from her eternal forest tomb with no choice but to welcome Yggdrasil's never-ending embrace. She was the earth now, and the earth was her, and here she would watch the forest as an unwavering sentinel. Here she would watch the world go on living and dying, would watch the tree feed on more souls that would stand guard along with her. Always watching,